Hi lovelies. Right, I've been promising myself and you to do this video for as long as I can remember, and it's my favourite pie of all. It's the English pork pie. Well, you've seen the thumbnail. Let's get on with it. Okay, ingredients. I've got 500 grams of prepared pork. I've got about 17.5–18 grams of Mr. Paul's pork pie seasoning. There'll be a link to that and the video from which it comes in the description below this video. Mr. Paul has been a great friend and a great mentor to me in making these wonderful pies. I've got chicken stock cube, and I've got some pork rind. It's the rind I cut off the shoulder joint when I made the pork filling. But we'll get into that in a minute. The first thing I want to do is get on with the standing crust pastry, and for this we need, in this case I'm using 350 grams of strong white bread flour. So you need bread flour particularly for this because it's got the stronger consistency. Am I right? Put me right in the comments, boys and girls. And the next thing I need is 120 grams of lard, and only lard will do for this, with 150 mils of water and a teaspoon of salt, which I've got all in that pan, and you'll see why, because I need to get some heat under that and get that boiling. Meanwhile, let's cut to showing you how I cut this up. So let me quickly show you how we chop the meat up for a pork pie. It is not minced as people think. We chop it up into these tiny pieces. So what I do is I cut it into strips like this and do a few at a time. And I'm using pork shoulder here, which I believe is a really good cut for it. You can also use belly, but you want to make sure that the meat content to fat ratio, you need about 20% fat in this to get it right. And don't forget, it is a force meat, so it does need some good seasoning. So I'm chopping it up into little bits, and the same with the fat. So rather than it being minced, we've got these nice chunky pieces of meat and fat like that. And that, boys and girls, is your pork pie filling. I'm going to raise the meat content of this, and I'm going to be careful not to add any more fat now because there's plenty in there. So I'll take out these strips of fat and work only on this bit of lean. So that's it, and then once you've done that, that then gets seasoned, and then it ends up in the pie. Once again, I have my good friends Bradley Bennett and Mr. Paul to thank for their kindness and generosity in helping me make this video. Thank you very much, guys. You really are making a difference. Thank you very much. Okay, an important ingredient in this pie is an aspic jelly, and the way that a butcher would make aspic jelly is to boil down pig's trotters. But I'm going to try by using this the rind that I took off the shoulder joint, and I'll boil that down. I don't need an awful lot of aspic, just enough to fill the voids inside the pie, but we'll get to that at the right time. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water, maybe about a cup of water, and then boil down this rind with a chicken stock cube, and that will give us a nice aspic jelly. So I'll let that run for quite a while because we don't need it just yet. So just a little bit of water really, into which I'm going to put all this rind, and I've cut it up so it works better. and I'll pop in my stock cube, and I'll just let that go for, I don't know, an hour or so, to extract all the gelatin from that wonderful pork rind. So I'll get that on. Okay, now my pastry, lard and water is coming up to the boil, and I want it to boil. I want it to boil and make sure that all of the lard is dissolved, and it is important that this boils. It will spit and splash a little bit, but worry not, dear friends. Yeah, I've heard from other online cooks that all you need to do is melt that, but I learned from my dear friend Mr. Paul that you've really got to boil it, otherwise your pastry doesn't turn out nice and crispy. So I do want nice and crispy pastry, as do you, my dear friends. So I'm giving that a good old boil. I'm going to make a well in there, and then we'll drop that in boiling. Lovely stuff. Now, I don't know if you've ever worked with standing crust or hot water pastry before, but it may look daunting at the moment, but I promise you it is the easiest dough I know to work with. It really is so simple. So we'll get that all mixed in. You can't get in there with your fingers yet because it's just simply too hot, because it's had boiling lard and water in it. But as you see, as you mix it with a spoon or put it in your mixer, if you've got a mixer, all the better for you. I mean, use it. But with a bread hook, with a dough hook, I don't have one, so I tend to do everything by hand. I don't have one. I mean, I might have bought one, but I really don't have the space for it here. It's a nightmare. Okay, right. I have worked in smaller kitchens, boys and girls. I once cooked a meal for 12 crew on a 55-foot Camper Nicholson sailing yacht. So I cooked quite an impressive meal as well. I surprised myself at that time. Anyway, let's get this going. So now that I've mixed that, I need to set that side to cool a little bit. You need to run the dough hook on that for about 2.5–3 minutes to really stretch the gluten in there. And that's the reason why we use this strong bread flour. We want a good hard crust. And it's a bit hot for me to put my hand in there, so I'm just going to leave that to cool for a bit, and we'll talk more about the filling. Right, to prepare the filling, all we need is the Mr. Paul's pork pie seasoning. So that's going in. I'm going to mix that in really well, and typical for me, I'm going to do that by hand. You can use a spoon or use what you want. And because it's a force meat, it's going into a pie, you need more seasoning than you would normally put for that amount of meat. You need to be really over seasoning any kind of force meat. So if that's for sausages or for even burgers and what have you, it's good to season it. So I like to get that in and seasoned and let that sit until it's needed now. So I'll put that back in the fridge. Don't forget, if you like what you see, please like, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to share it with your friends. Thanks, it all helps enormously during these tough times, so thank you in advance. Okay, I'm rigged for pastry now. I've got my granite slab down. That will help things. And what I'm going to do, because I don't have that dough hook and kneading machine, so to speak, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the dough and work it while it's warm, still a bit warm, and help stretch those gluten fibres. And what I do is I just literally fold it over and push it, fold it over, push it, like that. So let's talk about moulds. Alright, let's clarify this. There are it's a really old recipe, so there are as many opinions about this as there are families in Britain. And really, I mean, the people who make the so-called traditional melted Mowbray pork pies, they will tell you that it has to be made round a form. And yes, that was done historically for a lot of pies in this country, and it was made around a wooden form, the kind of which you see on your screen now. And the form was used to fold the pastry around it to make the pie shape, and for that you needed a standing crust pastry like this with a good firm texture. And when you actually if you make this at home and you try this and you eat this, you will see, you know, if you're not used to standing crust pastry, you'll be a convert from that moment onwards, and you'll want to make a lot of things with it. It's the perfect pastry for making any kind of picnic pie. So you'll see in my Pies playlist, I've used it on a number of occasions. Only now I'm a bit smarter because my friend Mr. Paul has taught me a few tricks on how to make pie crusts really well. And of course his excellent seasoning recipe. So make sure you check out his channel, and you'll learn a few great things from Mr. Paul. I'm going to use a different kind of mould because I do call myself the lazy cook, and I don't like the idea of working too hard. So I went along and found this wonderful little, it's actually a panettone mould, and I can imagine it would make a really great, fantastic, highly stacked cheesecake as well, but I might do that in one recipe. Comments below please if you want to see that. A highly stacked cheesecake, that would be a thing, wouldn't it? I certainly know one person who'd like to see that, and he's sitting not too far away from me at the moment. My brother. He's got a sweet tooth like you wouldn't believe. The best thing about this is it's got a bottom that flips, so I've got it this way up, so it gives a shallower pie effectively by about 1/4 inch, but it sits in there and brings the level of the bottom up to give a nice flat bottom to the pie. Or you can turn it the other way up to take more filling or whatever you want to do. I would think for panettone you'd turn it the other way up, but I don't make panettone. Another thing you might have noticed is that I'm not using flour on this surface. Why is he not using flour, says boys and girls? Well, because he doesn't need to. And you'll see a lot of people, including myself in my earlier videos, working hot dough pastry and using flour as I would with any other kind, but you really simply don't need to. It's a very oily sort of pastry because of the lard content, and it really is firm. As you can see, I'm moving it on and around this granite slab, and it's really not leaving anything behind. It's really fantastic. So I've given that a good old knead now, and I'm just going to sort of pop that back in my bowl and leave that for about an hour or so. Let it cool down. I really can't work it while it's this soft. I need it to be more stiff, more clay-like, and it's not there yet. It's still quite liquid. So I'll get that in there, let that cool off. I think what I'll do is I'll spread its surface area a bit and then let it cool off in my kitchen windowsill. Alright, meanwhile my pork stock over here is boiling away, releasing that gelatin into the stock and hopefully making me a really good aspic jelly, which we'll need a bit later in the process. Alright, that's boiling down nicely. You can let it boil down. The tip is to let it boil down to about half of the original liquid volume. The more you boil that down, the stiffer your aspic jelly will be. Okay, so you need to boil that down. I'm going to let that run for a few more minutes and then we'll get on with it. Alright, now my pastry is nice and cool. It's stiff but still malleable. So what I want to do, first of all, I want to just break off a bit, about a quarter of it, maybe a bit less than that, for a lid. And what I want to do is I want to get that rolled out now so I know where I am. So I'm just going to roughly shape it. Check out my lovely granite rolling pin. Super it is. Nice and heavy. So I want to roll this out till it's just a bit wider than the springform tin, but still substantial enough in size. And note, I'm not using any flour. I don't need it. This is a common misconception with the use of these this pastry. And then all I'm going to do with that is push down on it and then take that away. 1 second. I'm going to get me apple corer, or you can just cut a hole in it with a knife, and then lift that out, and then we've got ourselves a lid. So I'll lift that up, put that to one side, and then we can go about rolling our pastry to fill our springform mould. So I'm going to get it to roughly that shape, and then I'm going to use my fist as a kind of a mould, and then force it down. Be gentle with this, you don't want to ruin everything. So then I work that all the way up the sides, and I've got rather more dough here than I'm going to need, so there'll be a fair bit of trim off, but I'd rather work with an excess and trim it off than not have enough, if you know exactly what I mean. I'm sure you do. So we end up looking like that. Now you can feel along the sides how wide you want your pie crust. If you want it nice and thick, hey, make it thicker. It'll take a little more baking, but I think you'll still end up with a wonderful pie. So I'm going to let that come up and over the top like that, and then I'm just going to hold it like that and run down it with a knife, or with, like I'm doing here, and you'll see it's a nice thick pastry. But that'll be a nice thick pastry crust. So I'll just trim that down for the excess that I've just. So I'm just going to get my filling, form it into a little ball, drop it in, push it down firmly and fill it to very close to the top. Make sure you push it down as you fill it. You don't want any air bubbles in there. And as you can see, this is a very generous filling. There's 500 grams of pork more or less going into there. And let's just see where we are. I think that's around about right. I don't want to go any further than that, so there's a little bit left over, but we can make a mini pork pie with that little bit of extra dough that we've got there. If you want to see another video of me making smaller pattern pork pies, let me know in the comments. I just want to wet the edge here for mating up with the lid. There we go. Then we bring along the lid, we put it on, and we push it down evenly so that it looks like that. You with me so far? So we end up with a very even looking, nice looking lid. And then we use the 2-finger method. So I'm pushing down with a thumb and pushing with these 2 fingers, interlocking with the previous one. Push it in nicely. Once you've got it looking right, you'll know where you are. And then that just pushes in, and just keep going round like that. You can probably see it better when my hands aren't in the way. So there, like that. I mean, that does look impressive, doesn't it? Already, that's before you even get it baked. So we've got a hole in the lid. Why do we put a hole in the lid? Well, as that pork cooks inside the pie, it will shrink, and certainly as it cools, it will shrink a little more. And some of the moisture from that will escape up through the hole and out. Now, what we end up with is a void between the pastry case and the actual meat itself. Okay, now I know the jury's out about whether you like the jelly or you don't like the jelly, but the jelly there serves a very important purpose. The jelly that we're going to put in that hole after the pork pie is cooled is going to fill that void and keep the filling moist. When you cut the pie, you don't have to eat the jelly, you can discard that if you want. Personally, I love it and I really enjoy it, but I know my brother, he doesn't particularly like it because he doesn't like those kind of textures. But each to their own, but just remember that the jelly's there for a purpose, an important purpose. Right, baking. I want to give that a wash of egg yolk first, and then we'll bake it at about 180 degrees Celsius, which is 350 Fahrenheit, for about an hour and 20 minutes. But I will keep you informed. So I'm just going to get the egg wash. So for my egg wash, I'm using a yolk only, which I just separated using the shells. You can use whole egg, but this gives a better, richer, it just gives a better shine all round. It's just better. So I'm just going to dab in there. You don't want to use the whole egg, you just want to make sure it's painted evenly in and around the pie. I think I've got things a little out of sequence here because I really need, before to bake this pie, I need to let it rest for a couple of hours in its current state. I would normally do that before I did the egg wash, but we shall see if it turns out alright. I'm sure it'll be perfectly good. So you don't want any egg pooling anywhere in this. You just want to evenly cover the top of the pie with your egg wash. So I'll put all that to one side. And now I'm going to take that whole pie, chill it in my fridge for a couple of hours, and what will happen then is when the pie cooks, it'll just cook better without cracking, without breaking up. So I'm just going to put that away in my fridge for a couple of hours. Okay, that's been in the fridge for a couple of hours. So I'm painting that again evenly on so there are no pools of egg, and then that's now ready to go into the oven, 180 degrees. I'm going to watch the small pie, but the big one needs to go into the oven for 180 degrees for about an hour and 20 minutes, but I'll keep an eye on it. This one will be ready within about 20-30 minutes. this is the 40-minute period, so let's have a look at that. He looks about ready, doesn't he? So I'm going to take him out, leave him out, and just let him cool off. So that was at 40 minutes. I checked him at 20 and he was nowhere near done, so I left him for another 20 minutes. My bigger pie is still cooking away. Alright, I've let that cool off a little bit, and I'm going to run, oh, it's coming out already. I'm going to run a knife around it, see how it is. See if I can just pop that out. Come in. And there we go. Right. For a full-scale pork pie, yeah, I would have to wait till that cooled off and then put in some of the aspic jelly, but I'm going to share that now with my brother. We're going to have that hot, just as a little treat. So I'm going to cut it in half, and that's the reveal of a hot, freshly baked pork pie. Does look rather good. So we're at an hour and 10 minutes now for the pie. Let's have a quick look. Oh, it's looking good. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to slip off the mould, and have a look at that, see how it looks. There is some slight cracking in it, so I was probably a little premature on baking it. I should have probably left it to stand longer, but I'm working on a pretty strong time constraint here. Let's have a look at the temperature of it. So I'll look at the internal temperature. I go into the pie, and I'm reading that at 61 degrees. So I'm going to put that in for another 10 minutes at 61 degrees Celsius. Not quite the temperature I want it to be. So I'm going to put that in and bake it as it is for another 10 minutes. Okay, let's have a look at this. We're looking at a good 10 minutes later. That looks pretty amazing. I think we can call that a wrap. And as far as the baking is concerned, I'll just double check with the temperature. Yeah, that's good. That's 75 Celsius in the middle, and if I let that stand, that actual temperature will rise a little bit. So we're in the clear. That's a done deal. So what's left for me to do now, boys and girls, is to let this pie cool down, cool right down. So my pie has cooled down. It's cooled down to the point where it's perfectly okay to lift it. And what I'll do is I'll remove that and sit it back in there. And more importantly, the inside has cooled down to the point where I can actually see the meat wobbling around inside it. And that's precisely where we want to be for the next stage. Because what's happened now is the meat has shrunk inside that pie, and the pie crust has stayed more or less the same size, and there's a void now between the actual meat of the pie and the pie walls. So I've strained down my gelatine, which you saw me making. I've strained it off the skin, and I'm now going to put a little funnel in the top and start filling the pie with the liquid. Now that will take a while, and it will sink down, and we can go again. And it will sink down. This liquid, of course, will turn to jelly. I've reduced the whole liquid and the skin down to about 1/3 of its original just by leaving the heat under it. and that will make a nice stiff gelatin when this cools down. What I'm looking at is to see if it's leaking out anywhere in the bottom of the pie, but it's not. It's just being absorbed into the pie itself. You can, of course, make up your gelatin with a chicken stock cube and a sachet of gelatin. Just make it up according to the instructions, and you'll get the same. There you go, that's pretty much it. It doesn't want to go anymore. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mop that top up with some kitchen paper, just to clean it up a bit, make it look nice. Kitchen paper is a little bit reluctant to accept all that juice. There we go. That yellow colouring you see is from the chicken stock cube I used with the pork skin, but ever such slight pressure on there shows that that pie is now full of gelatin, and we are now ready to put that. I'll let that cool a little bit more, and then I'll chill it, and it will be chilled overnight, and the reveal will be tomorrow. Well, here we are the next morning, and it's time to cut. Let's have a look at this beautiful pork pie. And it's crispy, crusty. I can't wait to dig into this. Let's get a cut going. Oh, lovely. Oh, it's almost a travesty to cut into a thing of such beauty. Let's get this cut down like that. Oh yes, and the jelly's filled the void. A little bit of fat in there. Absolutely gorgeous. That is absolutely amazing. And I'll just cut another slice to show you better the inside. There we go. Another nice slice up. Beautiful. You see why we don't mince it, so you get these nice pieces, these nice chunks. And there's the inside of the pie. How gorgeous is that? Right, I'm going to quickly serve this up into a mini ploughman's lunch, and then I'll show you that. So there you see it, served up with English mustard, pickle, and British favourite, Branston pickle. Think a bit more of that, because that looks gorgeous, doesn't it? So that's a sweet Branston pickle with it, ploughman's pickle. And now for the taste test. So here we have it, my lovely pork pie. I'm going to give that a dip of English mustard, because I just know that's going to be great. That's insanely good. Taste that crust. It's right there, that boiling. Boil your water and lard, trust me on that. That is just amazing. Beautifully seasoned, absolutely delicious. The pastry's right on point. Yeah, that's a great pork pie. That's the best pie I've ever made. then some. Rather pleased with that.